How are you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Vav, Daf 36, Masechta Shevuos. Friends, your friends, as you might be able to hear, I have is it called a lozenge? A lozenge? Like a throat lubricant sucking candy thingy? I'm almost done with it, so you won't have to hear me dealing with it for the whole daf. But to make things interesting, I'm recording with a lozenge in my mouth, just to make things fun. A little challenge for episode 1980. The years are getting more interesting. We've been in the 1960s, 1970s. Now we're getting into the 80s. We're going to get some hair metal. We got some interesting jobs coming up. 1980s, 1990s. Okay, I'll go find them. So, in the spirit of the 1980s, I have a lozenge, but I'm almost done with it, so you won't have to deal with it for too long. However, today we are finishing the fourth parak of Masechta Shevuos, parak Shevuos Ha'edus, and we are starting the fifth parak Shevuos Hadayon. Who's ready? Who is ready? We're going to wrap up the Mishnah that we learned yesterday, the second Mishnah from yesterday, and we are. I feel like I could pronounce words a little better without a sucking candy. I'll go upon him. Okay, so we're going to finish up the Mishnah from yesterday, the second Mishnah from yesterday, as well as the fourth parak of Masechta Shevuos, and we will learn the Mishnah, the first Mishnah, or I think all the Mishnah is really, for the fifth parak of Masechta Shevuos. Okay, fine. Okay. Alright, here we go. We are on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis, 2 lines before it gets wide. V'chol kinuyin ve'elu chayavin. If you do it, well, Mama should then sucking candy. She won't have to deal with it for that much longer. I could just swallow it at this point, but I'm not going to do it. What were we talking about? So by Shevuos Hadayonim, if you make the guy Shvua and use the name of God. So even if you use all of the the second candy is gone. Even if you use all of the kinuyim, the alternative names of God, that is a valid Shavua. But we have a contradiction. Frex the Gemara. Yiten Hashem Eischol Olav L'Shvua. So this is a braise from Sota. This is a braise from Sota. One thing that I will point out now at the beginning of the braise. Wait, excuse me, 1 second. Something that I will point out now at the beginning of the braise, just because to avoid confusion in a minute. So this is a braise from Masechta Sota. We're going to be comparing Sota and Shevuos. And the question is, what's Kan and what's Lahalan? What's here and what's there? Because this is a brisa from Sota, so here is a reference to Sota and there is a reference to Shevuos. Why am I pointing this out specifically? Because there is confusing language in the brisa that that there are notes that actually switch around Lahalan and Kan. So to just preempt any potential confusion, because this is a brisa from Sota, here is a reference to Sota, there is a reference to Shevuos. Okay, and you might notice that I'm switching some words around. Just Kan and Lahalan. Okay. Says the Gemara, V'raminu. But we have a contradiction, right? We just said that we can use any of the alternative names of God by Shevuos Ha'edus. We have a contradiction. Yiten Hashem Eischol Olav L'Shvua. So it says by Sota that God will make you a curse and a oath. So we had it actually had come up the other day about by the Owen, right? That there's the Owen by Shevuos Ha'edus as well as by Sota, and we said that in Shevuos Ha'edus as well as Sota they're both oaths. So here we see the word oath in the context of Sota. Right? Yitin Hashem oscha Allah v'lishvua. Matam lomar. How come? Wait, 1 second. I need to blow my nose. 1 second. Yeah, I thought maybe I'd be able to get away without blowing my nose, but okay, here we are. All right, so it says by Sota that God will make you Allah, which is a curse, v'leshvua, and an oath. Matam lomer, v'alok v'nemar v'shbi'a kohenes ha'isha b'shvuas ha'Allah. Right, the pasuk already says shvuas ha'Allah. So then why does the end of the pasuk need to say Allah v'leshvua? And the Fisha Nemar Vishama Kol Allah, because it says by Shevuos Edus that you will hear the voice of Allah. Nemar Kan Allah, V'nemar Lahalan Allah. It says so Kan is by Shevuos, is by Sota, and it says also Lahalan by Shevuos Edus Allah. Malahalan Shavua Afkan Shavua. Just like so ma kan shvua af lahalan shvua. So just like here by Sota there's a shvua, so also over there by Shevuos ha'edus there is a shvua. Ma kan b'shem af lahalan b'shem, and just like over here by Sota it's with God's name, not alternative names, but God's actual name, Shem HaMefoirish. So also by Shevuos ha'edus we're talking about Shem ha-meforish. So what's the kasha? The kasha is that we are learning b'gzeira shava from Sota that by Shevuos ha'edus it's davka b'shem ha-meforish, not the alternative names, and yet our Mishnah had said even the alternative names. Amar Abaye leikasha Reb Chanina bar Idi ha-rabonon. Says Abaye, no problem. It's a machlokes. Reb Chanina bar Idi and the rabbis, the Tanya learned in the Brayso. Reb Chanina bar Idi Omer says Reb Chanina bar Idi, Hoyel v'Omer Teda Hishava v'al Tishava. Right? The Torah says there are times when you swear. For example, Modav Miksas Hatayna Yishava, as we're going to learn about in not the next parak that we're starting today, but the parak after that we'll be starting already by the end of the week. Or I don't know when these episodes go live, but basically. And Daf Lamed Ches in 2 days already. We'll be starting Perek Shevuos HaDayonim, which talks about Modav Miksas Hatayni Yishava. So the Torah talks about swearing, and also there are times, right, that you don't swear, right? Don't swear falsely, for example. Kalel va'al tekalel. There are times when you curse, for example, by a sota, and there are times when you don't curse, for example, God. Ma'ishova b'shem, avlo tishova b'shem. Just like when you do swear, it's with God's name, as I think we'll already learn about in Daf Lamed Ches. So also when you don't swear, it is right. Don't swear falsely with God's name. Ma kalel b'shem, avlo tkalel b'shem. And just like when you curse, right? Sota, for example, is with God's name. So also don't curse. Is also don't curse with God's name. So what do we see? So we see that according to Reb Chanina bar Idi, we are talking about Davka swearing with the name of God. So we're Davka talking about swearing with the name of God. Okay? So I guess Tishavas, I was saying Modav Miksas, but I guess that also applies to Shevuos ha'edus, and we're saying Davka b'shem. So it's the opinion of Reb Chanina bar Idi that Davka has to be b'shem, but in our Mishnah we say that it could even be with the Kinurim, with the alternative names. V'Rabbanon. Now, according to the rabbis who say that it could be the alternative names, so Igmir Gzeir Shava, if they learn out the Gzeir Shava from Sota, then it would have to be the Shem HaMiyuchad, just like by Sota v'lo Gmir Gzeir Shava. And if they don't learn out the Gzeir Shava, well then Allah Dishvuahi Minalu. How do we know that Allah is a reference to a swear? How do we know that it's a reference to a swear? It might just mean a curse. So nafgaluhu midisanya. Well, they learn out that Allah is a swear from the following verse. Ein Allah ela lashon shvua. Allah is a lashon. It means a swear, an oath. Similarly, it says, that the Kohen makes the Sota swear with the oath of Allah. So Hasam, okay, so we see that Allah is a oath. But Hasam Shevuos ha'Allah ksiv. I can understand why, in that case, by a Sota, Allah means an oath, because it specifically says Shevuos ha'Allah, the oath of Allah. But how do we know by, for example, Shevuos ha'Edus, where it doesn't say Shevuos ha'Allah, it just says Allah? How do we know that that is a reference to an oath? So this is how to understand this Braise. Allah, ein Allah elo b'shvuah. Okay, so when it says Allah, which means curse, so I only know that an oath that includes a curse, right? Shevuos ha'Allah. All I know is an oath that includes a curse. Right? The pasuk says by Sota, the curse, right? B'Shevuos ha'Allah, a curse, an oath that includes Allah. Now, how do we know that by Shevuos ha'Edus, where all it says is Allah, it could be even when there's no Shvuah associated with it, right? Even when the Allah is not included in the Shvuah, even independently. So, Talmud Omar v'shama kol Allah, v'shama Allah, v'shama kol. That it means that even if it's just the Allah, even if it's just so I think this would mean I don't know which one means which, but I think the Allah is teaching that maybe a shvuah that includes an Allah, and then the kol, the voice, is even just an oath on its own, even if there's no curse in it. All right. So somehow that teaches that, but Allah alone could mean like a shvuah. It doesn't have to, even when it doesn't say Shevuos ha'Allah, like an oath with a curse in it. You could just have an oath on its own. It's a little unclear, but somehow it means that we learn that by Shevuos ha'Edus, even just a plain old oath, even without a curse or any, an oath that doesn't include a curse. Right, so I guess Allah would be an oath that includes a curse, and kol would just be a oath without a curse. Yeah, I guess that makes sense, right? Because we're saying by Shevuos ha'Edus, right? It's and if you don't, then right? That's the name of, you're including the name of God, right? That you're going to get in trouble. So even if you don't invoke the name of God, so then still, you would, it would still be a valid shvuah, and you'd be chai for that. Okay, now, Amar Babo, says Rababo, Minayin le Allah shehi shvuah. How do we know that Allah is a oath? Shenemer vayavei oso be Allah v'gomer. It says that Nebuchadnezzar brought Chizkiyahu into an Allah, Tzidkiyahu into an Allah. And it says that Tzidkiyahu rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar had brought him into a oath. So we see that Allah is in oath. Tana Orur Bonidur Beklala Boshvua, that the word Orur could be referenced to an excommunication or a curse or an oath. Bonidur, how do we know that it is a excommunication? Tichsiv Oru Meiros or Malach Hashem Oru Orur Yoshvel. So it says there by Meiros Orur. And it says Ula that with 400 shofars, Barak excommunicated Meiros. So we see that it says Orur and it's talking about excommunication. But Klala Orur is Ochit a curse. Tichsiv ve'ele yamdu ala Klala. The following, and these people will stand for the curse. Uchsiv Orur ha'isha shayas pesel v'geimer. So we said Orur is a curse. Bo Shvuah, a curse. Dichsiv, an oath. Or is an oath. Dichsiv, Vayashba Yoshua bois hahi lemer or ha'ish lefnei Hashem v'gomer. This is a reference to Jericho, right? That when Joshua says that anybody who rebuilds Jericho will be accursed, and it's so it says that Vayashba Yoshua, that Yoshua oathed them, and it says Arur ha'ish. So the oath. So Arur was a reference to an oath. Maybe he did two things. He made them swear, and he also oathed them and also cursed them separately. So Yisrael nigash bayom ahu bayoil shol esom lemer Arur ha'ish sheyochav v'gomer. Right, King Saul said to all the people that accursed is anybody who eats until the end of the day. And Jonathan did not hear when his father oathed the people. So we see that Arur is a reference to an oath. But maybe here ochit. There were two separate things, an oath and a curse, but they're not the same thing. So miksiv ve'arur. Well, it doesn't say and also Arur, so rather it means that the Arur and the oath are the same thing. But if once already you get to there, so then you're going back to Joshua, it also doesn't say ve'arur, so you could also learn from Joshua that Arur is a reference to an oath. Amr Reb Yossi, Reb Chanina, Omein, bo Shevuos, bo Kabbalas Devarim, bo Hamonas Devarim. The word Omein can be is a reference to an oath as well as accepting matters, as well as concurring events. Bo Shvua Omin is a oath. Dichsev ve'amra isha Omin Omin. By Sota, the woman says Omin, and that is an oath. Bo Kabbalas Devarim is also in acceptance of events. Dichsev Arur ha'ish asher lo yakim as divrei atera azayis lasis esam. Right, accursed is the person who does not establish this Torah to do them. V'amar kola amen, amen, and they accepted by saying amen. But amonas devarim, it's also a concurrence, right? Concurring. Dichsev vayomer Yirmiyahu anovi, vayomer Yirmiyahu anovi amen. Kenyasa Hashem yakem Hashem is devrecha amen. So shall God do. Hashem will establish your word. So we see amen is used there as concurring. Amar Belazar says, Belazar, lav shvua, hein shvua. This is an interesting opinion. Says Reb Elazar that simply saying no or saying yes can even be a shvua, which is interesting. I wonder if this is maybe like why people like to say like bli neder. You know, they always like to make sure that whatever commitment they make, even though they're not saying I'm making an oath or I'm a shvua or konam, they're not saying any of these things, but still they like to say, bli neder, right? Even though, as my friend Shammai pointed out, that maybe it should be bli shvua, akopanim, because maybe it's because of this Gemara, right? That just simply saying no to something or saying yes to something can already be considered like a shvua, and therefore they want to be clear, like, by accepting, by committing to doing whatever, it's bli neder. I'm not, if I don't end up doing it, don't hold it against me. Bishtam alav shvua, I can understand why no is a shvua. God says, I won't bring any more floods. And it says, and it says that these are the waters of Noach that I oathed. So we see that lo is an oath. He says, I'm not going to bring any more floods, and that apparently was an oath. How do we know that saying yes to something is ochit a shvua? Svaru, it's logical. The lav shvua, ein nam shvua. Well, if no is a shvua, yes is also a shvua. Rava says, Rava v'ha v'huda amar lav trei zimne. V'huda amar hein trei zimne. And Rava says, but in order for yes or no to be an oath, you would have to repeat it. You have to say yes or no. You have to double down on it in order for it to be a shvua. Dichsiv v'lo yikares kol basar od mabul v'lo yeh od mayim lamabul. That the Eibishter twice said that there won't be any more floods, and that is why it would be considered an oath. Umidelav trei zimnei hein nami trei zimnei. And then following the pattern from earlier, that if the negative would have to be twice, well then the positive also would have to be twice. Hamakalal bechulon chayv divrei Reb Meir v'chacham poten. Anybody who curses the Rabbanu Shalom Chas v'Shalom with any of these alternative names would be chayv according to Reb Meir. The Chacham say poter. Tanarabban the Rabbis taught ish ki yikalel Eloikov v'noso chetoy. Any person, any man who curses his God will bear his sin. Why do we need this? The very next pasuk says, anybody who curses the name of God shall surely die. Is it possible that you only be chayv for the Shem HaMiyuchad? It says, Shem Hashem, most you must. So, Minayin the rabbis is Sakanuyun, how do you know to include the alternative names? So it says, that's where we have the previous pasuk, ish ki yikal elokav, anybody who curses his God, no matter, even if you use an alternative name. This is the opinion of Reb Meir. The Chacham say, Hashem HaMiyuchad b'misa, v'ala kinuyin be'azhar. Whereas the Chacham say, you're chayv misa if you use Ma'am Shem Hashem, but for the alternative names, you are simply violating a negative commandment. Somebody who curses his father or mother, God forbid. Man chacham, who are the chachamim who say that you are potter for using the alternative names? Reb Menachem bar Yossi, Desani Reb Menachem bar Yossi Omer, Benokvo Shem, you must. That the pasuk by God, what does the pasuk say? The pasuk says, "V'nokev Shem Hashem, most you must rogam yigmu bo kol eda kager ke'ezach benokvo Shem you must." It then repeats at the end of the pasuk, "Benokvo Shem you must." Why does it have to repeat it? It's extra. Well, it's not needed for cursing God, because we already had it say "V'nokev Shem Hashem, most you must." So then what's it doing there? It's to teach about a different halacha pertaining to cursing one's parents. So Mata Melomer Shem Limit Al Amakal Aviv Imo Shenuchayv Ad Shekalim B'Shem. It teaches that one who curses, God forbid, their father or mother, they will only be chayv for using the Shem HaMiyuchad, not for alternative names. Amakal Atzmo V'Chaver V'Chulei. Somebody who curses himself or his friend with these alternative names is chayv. Amar B'Yanai V'divrei Akol, says Rabbi Yanai, everybody agrees with this. Atzmo dichsev v'aki shomer l'cha, meaning everybody agrees that even the alternatives are also for yourself or for your friend. Dichsev, so Atzmo, by cursing himself, dichsev v'aki shomer l'cha v'shmonav shechal me'od. It says, guard yourself and your soul a lot. Uchdab oven, amar bila d'amar rab oven, d'amar kol, if it says hishamer or pen or al, it's mitzvah losaise. And here it says hishamer. So it's a losaise. You have to guard yourself a lot. And that precludes cursing yourself. Don't curse yourself. And it's a lav if you do. The chaver and his friend, tichsev lo sekalel cherish. Don't curse a cherish, i.e. don't curse people. Okay. Yakicha, said the Mishnah, Yakicha Hashem v'chein yakichem Elokim. Zo, right, I switched around some words based on the Agos Abach. Zoi Allah aksuva ba Torah. This is the Allah, right, when it says v'shama kol Allah, that is the Allah that is written in the Torah. Yosef Rav Kahana Kamedir of Yehuda. Rav Kahana was sitting before Rav Yehuda. V'Yosef v'Ka'amr, he was saying before Rav Yehuda, Hamas Nisan, and he was saying, right, so Rav Kahana was before Rav Yehuda, and he was saying over our Mishnah. Keditznan, as it is taught, meaning, Rav Kahana was sitting before Rav Yehuda and saying, Yakicha Hashem, God shall smite you. Amalei Kaneh, Rav Yehuda says to Rav Kahana, hey, can't you use euphemisms? Why do you have to be looking right at my face and saying, God shall smite you? Maybe say, God shall smite your enemies or something. Yosef Umar Abban Kamadir of Kahana, and another time some other rabbis were sitting before of Kahana, Yosef Kamar, and they said, Gam kel yitotzchol anetzach yachtucha v'yisochacha mi'oil v'shereshcha meretz chaim sela. Quote the puzzle that God's going to get you in big trouble. Amalei Kaneh, and if Kahana says to this, hey, can't you use a euphemism? Why do I need two anecdotes that are basically saying the same thing? Can't you use a euphemism? when you're talking straight to me. So well, if I only had the first example, I would think, okay, when you're quoting a Mishnah, you could use a euphemism instead of what it actually says. But by actual verses, I might think that you have to be true to the source, and you can't euphemize. So we see that no, even by verses, Rav Kahana was suggesting to euphemize. Okay. Al Yaakov yivarecheko v'yetiv loch. Rav Meir mechayev chacham poter. Right? If he says, if you testify for me, well then God will not smite you, and He will bless you, and He will do all sorts of good, gewaldige, awesome stuff for you. Implying that if you don't come and testify, you're in for it. How could it be that Rav Meir's opinion is one who says chayav? Right? He's saying, if you test for me, all sorts of great things are going to happen to you. Implying that if you don't testify for me, all sorts of horrible things are going to happen to you. And Rav Meir says, you'd be chayav in that case. The Rav Meir is on board with this implication thing. However, I thought Rav Meir is generally not on board with implication things, right? And Rashi points out that in the sugya of, right, Tanai Koful, right? Like the Tanai of was it Reuven, Gad, and Chatzi, Shevet, Menashe? That if we go forward and in the front lines, then we will be able to get the Eivah and our Yardin, and if we don't, then we won't. Right? So a Tanai needs to be, this is what happens if we do, and this is what happens if we don't. There can't be room for implications. So Reb Meir generally holds that we don't imply stuff, and yet over here he's saying that we do imply stuff. So I thought Reb Meir does not imply stuff. Ipuch. Okay, fine. You're right. Switch it around. Saying the Mishnah that the Chachamim are mechayev, Reb Meir is poter because he doesn't imply stuff. Because Reb Yitzchak Tana Kedetnan. However, when Reb Yitzchak came, he taka taught just like our Mishnah that Reb Meir says chayev. So Amar Rav Yosef, when Rav Yosef heard this, that our Mishnah says that Reb Meir says chayev, when Reb Yitzchak came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he quoted the Mishnah also like we have it. So Rav Yosef says, okay, something's up over here. It's not backwards. It can't be that we both have it backwards. No, it must be that we both have it right. We need to simply understand Reb Meir, what's the deal with Reb Meir, right? So it says, Amar Rav Yosef, Hashta da'anan t'nanachi v'chi asu Reb Yitzchak t'niachi shmamina davka t'nan. From the fact that we in our tradition are saying that Reb Meir says chayiv. When Reb Yitzchak came from Eretz Yisrael, he was saying the same thing. Reb Meir says chayiv. It must be that Reb Meir says chayiv. So elikasha, okay, but then how do we answer the question? Because Reb Meir doesn't hold of implying stuff, and yet in this case, in this Mishnah, if we say that Reb Meir says chayiv, it's because he implies that testify for me and it will be all hunky-dory. Implies, don't testify for me. You don't want to know what's going to happen. So elikasha kileis le bimamoina. So and for the Gemara, look, when Reb Meir doesn't hold of implying stuff, that's by mumminus. But if we're talking about isura, islay, he does hold of implying stuff. Okay, and I guess that we would say that this is talking about isure. Hare so to the isuru v'amr b'tanchum bar chachinoi hinaki or hanki ksiv, meaning it says hinaki, but it's without a yud, so therefore it could be like darshan hanki / kilu chanki. Meaning, basically, the pasuk says, "Im lo sotis hinaki." Right? If you're innocent, if you didn't have an affair by a sota, so then hinaki, you will be clean. You're all good. Go home. But if you did have an affair, so hinaki is without a yud between the hey and the nun, so you can darshan a kilu chanki. You will choke. Okay. So now the reason why we can make the drasha is specifically because the word doesn't have a yud, and therefore hinaki becomes chanki. But if we didn't have that, if let's say hinaki did have a yud in it, we wouldn't be able to make that drasha, and we also would not be able to imply that, if it says, if you did have an affair, if it says, if you didn't have an affair, you'll be innocent, though, can't we just imply, and if you did have an affair, you'll be in trouble? But we say no only because it says Chanki. I was watching this thing on YouTube earlier. A really sad thing on YouTube about like this like soldier. He was like sick and he was like really badly injured. He was in the hospital for like a really long time, and for like over a year. I saw they had like a TV in the room. I was thinking, well, I wouldn't want to say if God forbid anything like that happened to me. Yeah, God forbid, hopefully nothing like that will ever happen to me that I'll have to ever be in the hospital for so long. God forbid. But I was like thinking, hopefully this would never happen. Well, maybe there could be how about this? Maybe there could be like a good scenario in which this can happen. But anyways, there are so many episodes of Babylon Talmud. If ever there was a scenario where I wanted to just have Babylon Talmud just rolling straight, like 24 hours a day, there is enough Babylon Talmud right now that Babylon Talmud can go straight 24 hours a day, probably, I'd say for at least 2 months. Like you could put Babylon Talmud on a screen and just have it rolling 24 hours a day, and you wouldn't have any repeats for probably, I think, at least like 2 months straight. For 2 months straight, you could walk into that room and there will be a different episode going on. Yeah, I mean, hopefully that will never happen in a bad way. I was just thinking like that would be crazy, like to put that on and just have Babylon Talmud rolling straight for like months. Okay. Where were we? Why was I saying that? I don't know why I was saying that. So Enoki said, okay, no, so we wanted to say, okay, so what's the deal with Reb Meir? So maybe when he says that we don't imply stuff, that's by Mominus. No, that's by Isure. I know I could look at it in the Gemara, but wait, that's by Mominus, we don't say it. By Isure, we do say it. Yeah, but then we're saying Sota is Isure, and we don't say it. Right. So Kileisle b'mamona avav Isure isle. So when Reb Meir does not hold of the implying stuff, that's by Mominus, but by Isure he does hold it. But Hare Sota, the Isurehu, which is an Isur, Vam Reb Tanchum by Chachinoi. So Tanchum by Chachinoi, Hinaki Ksiv or Kilu. It's written like Hanki. Taima Dichsiv Hanki, that we could say Chanki Halavachi, but if it wasn't written that way, Lav Atashmein Lo Amrina. We wouldn't say that, well, let's just imply that if she is innocent, she will be, clean. That we can't just imply from there that if she's guilty, she'll be in big trouble. So even though it's Isura, we don't say the implication stuff. Ela ipuch, we say, okay, fine, we have no choice but to flip around the opinions. Reb Meir says, Potter, Chacham say, Chayv. Va'afilu be'isura leis le. And Reb Meir does not hold of the implication thing, whether by Mominus, whether by Isure. Maskif le Ravina asakasha. Uvi Isura leis le. By Isura's, Rav Meir does not hold of the implication thing. Rav Meir does hold of the implication thing by Isur. I'll prove it to you. Elamiyata shesuri yainu furei rosh dibemisa. Right? It says that, right? If the Kohanim go to do the avoda and they're fashnikit or they have long hair, so then they are chayv misa. And how do we know this? Right? So elamiyata shesuri yainu furei rosh dibemisa achinam deleisle. So Rav Meir. So if Rav Meir does not hold of the whole implication thing, then that would mean that also he does not hold of the whole implication thing by Shisuri Yain Ufurei Rosh. And as Rashi points out in the first Rashi on Lamed Vav Mud Beis, it says in the pasuk, right, Yain v'shecher al tesht v'lo samusu. Don't drink wine and you won't die, implying that if you drink wine and do the service in the temple, you will die. So that whole Isser is learned out from the implication thing. V'atanya, we learn in the Brayso, Elu shebemisa, the following are b'misa Shisuri Yain Ufurei Rosh. And nobody argues on that. Everyone seems to agree that doing the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash while fashnikit, you're going to be chayiv misa for that. And that's linked out from an implication of the pasuk. But Meir seems to agree. Okay, look. Really, we do flip around the... Right. So really, Rav Meir does hold of the implication thing when it comes to Isure, as we saw by Shesur Yain and Furei Rosh. He doesn't hold of the implication thing by mominus. How do we explain sota then? Right, so therefore in our case we're saying tepuch and one second. Okay, so we say that fine. So we say that fine. We do flip around the opinions in the Mishnah. However, when we flip around the opinions, don't understand that to mean that Reb Meir never holds of the implication thing. But kileisle b'mamona b'isura isle. He does hold of the implication thing by isura, as we saw by Shisur Yain and Furi Rosh. V'shani sota the isura the isbe mamonahu. Then it's different by sota because while sota, yes, there's isura, there's eshasish, but there's also mamonis, right? The ksuba, for example, is right. She won't collect her ksuba. So yeah. So that is why Reb Meir does not hold of the whole implication thing by sota, but he would generally hold of it by isura. For example, Shesur Yain, Ufruei, Rosh Hashanah Olach, Shevuos, Ha'edus. We'll come back to Perek Shevuos, Ha'edus. And now we begin the fifth Perek of Masechta Shevuos, Perek Shevuos HaPikadon. Shevuos HaPikadon Noheges ba'anoshim uva'anoshim. Shevuos HaPikadon, unlike Shevuos Ha'edus, Shevuos HaPikadon is shaykh to men, women, baruchokim v'krovim, relatives, non-relatives, b'kshem b'psulim, kosher people who are puzzle like thieves and stuff. Bifnei bezdin v'shalom bifnei bezdin, whether the shvua happens in bezdin or outside of bezdin, mipi atzma, if he is swearing himself, right, if it's from Ruvain directly. Mipi acherim, if Shimon is mashbia Ruvain, enuchayiv ad sheichbenu bebezdin to Reb Meir, that would have to be in bezdin. That's the opinion of Reb Meir v'chacham omrim bein mipi atzmo bein mipi acherim. Chacham says we make no distinction between mipi atzmo or mipi acherim. Kevin shekofar bo chayiv. If Ruvain denies it, he is chayiv, whether inside of bezdin or outside of bezdin. Chayiv al zdon hashvua. Chayiv for Ruvain is chayiv if he intentionally swears falsely. Val shigagosim zdona pikadin. Or if he intentionally swears falsely, but is unsure about if he has to bring a korban for that or not. However, he is potter for a straight up mistake. For example, he thought that he didn't owe anything, and it turns out that he did. It's an honest mistake. He does not bring a korban Shevuos HaPikadon for that. When we say that he is chayiv to bring a korban, what is he chayiv for? What is the korban? Oshom. Unlike the korbanos that we've been talking about till now with Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshov and Shevuos Bitoy and Shevuos Ha'edus, which is a korban olav yored, which is a chatos, this is a korban oshom that costs 2 silver shekels. Shevuos HaPikadon, Kate said, how does a Shevuos HaPikadon work? A deposit work? Amar lo, Shimon says to Reuven, Tainli pigdoni sheishli biyadcha. Give me back my book. Shvuah she'en lecha biyadi. I don't have your book. I swear I don't have your book. Or she'amar lo, ein lecha biyadi. Or he says, I don't have your book. Mashbi'acha ani. Do you swear? Amen. He says, I'm swearing you. Amen. He says, Amen. Right, as we said before, that Amen is Lashon Shvuah. Harei ze chayiv. So he is chayiv. Ishbiya olav chamish paimim. If Shimon swore Ruvain 5 times, ben bifnei bezdin, ben shaloi bifnei bezdin, whether inside, whether in court, outside of court, v'chafer, and he denies it, chayiv kol achas v'achas. Ruvain is chayiv for each denial, for each swear. Amar Reb Shimon matam. Reb Shimon says, how come? Because he can always, at any point, he's not a witness, right? By witness, right? That's what we said by Shevuos Ha'edus. If it's in court, so then after the first, you can only be chayiv once for the first swear, because once he says one thing, he can no longer change his mind. But when it comes to Shevuos HaPikadon, he can change his mind at any time. Therefore, he's going to be chayiv for each and every swear. Hayu chamisha tovim also 5 people. Let's see, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, and Zvulun all go to Ruvain and say, give us back our book that we lent you. We all own the book. Give it back to us. And Amru Lo, they said to him, Tain lanu pikadon sheyesh lanu biyadcha. Give us back our book. Shevuos she'ein lecha biyadi. He said, I don't have your book. He's chayiv once. Turns out he does. He's lying. He's chayiv once. Shevuos she'ein lecha biyadi v'lo lecha v'lo lecha. And he says, I don't have your book, or yours, or yours, or yours, or yours. Chayiv v'kol achas v'achas is chayiv, separate korban Shevuos hapikadons. Rab Elazar Omer ad shoma Shevuah ba'achrona. Rab Elazar says that the Shevuah needs to come at the end, so not Shevuah she'ein lecha biyadi, but rather ein lecha biyadi v'lo lecha v'lo lecha Shevuah. Rab Shimon Omer ad shoma Shevuah l'chol echad ve'echad. Rab Shimon says it has to have a separate Shevuah for each and every one. It's not enough just to say and you and you and you. Tein li pikadon v'tzumes yad gezel va'aveda. Give me my deposit, like my book or my money that I lent you, or you stole something from me, or I lost something and you have it. She'esh lecha biyadi, Shevuah she'ein lecha biyadi. And Reuven says, I swear I don't have anything. And chayiv la'achas is chayiv one korban Shevuos hapikadon, one oshrim gezelis. Shevuah she'ein lecha biyadi pikadon v'tzumas yad v'gezel v'aveda chayiv kol achas v'achas. If he specifies the things that he doesn't have, he'll be chayiv for each thing, for each specification. Give me my wheat and barley and spelt that you have. And Reuven says, I got nothing. I swear I got nothing. It's chayiv for each thing, for each denial. Even if he said chita, meaning, so Reuven says, give me your chita, give me my Shimon says, give me my chitin, and Reuven says, I don't have chita. It's the same thing. It will be treated the same way. So even if he says chita, saora, kusem is singular, it'll be chayiv for each denial. 3 korbanos basically. Onaste ufitiso es biti. Shimon says to Reuven, you honest or mefater my daughter, and therefore you owe me money. V'omer lo anasti v'lo pitisi, and Reuven denies it. Mashbiach ha'oni, Shimon swears him from amen, and he says amen. Chayev, so he is going to be chayev when he later admits it. Reuven is going to be chayev when he later admits it. Reb Shimon poter. Shimon shalom knas al piatzmo. Reb Shimon says poter because Reb Shimon says we're talking about the 50 silver coins that Reuven needs to pay Shimon as a fine, and that is a fine. And therefore is going to be potter for a fine. They said to Reb Shimon, "Afal pi she'enu mishalim knas al piatzmo, mishalim boshes uvgam al piatzmo." They say to Reb Shimon that Reb Shimon, even if the fine Reuven would be potter for if he admits it, but he would still have to pay the boshes and the fgam, and therefore he would be chayiv for the shvuah, for the shvuah. Gonavto es shori. Shimon says to Reuven, you stole my ox. He says, I didn't steal it. So be chayiv in that case because it's mominous. Gonavti, if Reuven says, yeah, I stole it, aval lo tavachti velo macharti, potter. If what he's denying is the tvicho mechira, which would make him be chayiv daled vehei, which is a fine, then he would be potter. Haim is shorcha es shori. If Shimon says to Reuven, your ox killed my ox. V'omer lo Hamis, and Reuven says, no, it didn't. Mashbeachoni v'omer omin chayiv. It'd be chayiv for that. It's mominous. Haim is shorcha es avdi. But if Shimon says your eved killed my eved, which means that Reuven would have to pay Shimon a 30 shekels fine. V'omer lo Hamis. Mashbeachoni v'omer omin potter. Omer lo chavalta bi. If Shimon says to Reuven, you wounded me. Ve'asisa bi chabura. You wounded me. You hit me and you wounded me. Ve'omer lo chavalti. Reuven says, no, I didn't. Ve'lo asisa bi chabura. I didn't wound you. Mashbeachoni v'omer min chayiv. So you chayiv in that case because it's mominous. Omer lo avdo. But if Shimon's eved says to him, or I guess Reuven's eved, whatever his eved says to him, hipata es sheni. You knocked out my tooth, which means that he goes free, which is a fine, right? We find the adon for knocking out his eved's tooth, and the eved goes free. Misimi says any, or you blinded my eye, which also the Eved would go free. He says, no, I didn't. Potter. She potter there because that's a fine. The Eved going free is a fine. If you'd be mishalim al pi atzmo, ha'imominus, so then he's chai. But if it's a knas that he's not, if he admits that he's potter, so then he would be potter for bringing an offer by Oshim Gzelos. Okay, that was daf Shish. That was daf Lamed Vav of Masechta Shevuos. We finished up the 4th parak of Masechta Shevuos, and we started the 5th parak Shevuos Apikoden. Peace out.